Well, I think my first job will be to learn what the department is all about. It's a very complicated department, and I'm sure it'll take me more than a few months to really learn all the details.
Was there any discussion among the members when they came time to confirm the recommendation?
Well, I was not in the room at the time of the confirmation, but during the discussion that I had with the board, I advised them that should I receive their approval, that I would certainly keep them well informed and seek their advice and counsel as we decided to make decisions that would improve the department.
A circuit judge in Georgia made a final ruling on the denial of the extradition. However, the Attorney General's office in Georgia filed an appeal on his preliminary decision, and it's currently in the Supreme Court of Georgia. I feel quite optimistic because of previous rulings by the Supreme Court of Georgia that we'll get Stoner back here. Also, the U.S. Supreme Court opposed our position.
How long do you think it'll be in terms of days, weeks, or months before you see what you're looking for to come about?
Well, it's speculation, but we've talked with the lawyers handling the case in Georgia, and they indicate that it could be as soon as possibly a month.
And what would you do then as soon as the extradition is completed? What would be the next step?
Well, we'd go get Mr. Stoner and then petition our courts to set down a trial date.
And how long do you think that would take, say, from this point, getting the trial brought forth?
That's very difficult to say, Dennis. There's really no way of knowing what judge might have it and how long his docket might be, or whether he would give priority to the matter.
Would it go to what court? In Montgomery County maybe, or Birmingham?
I would think Birmingham.
Major League Baseball umpires are normally looked upon as stubborn old men with abnormal vision and slow wits. Well, today, one of the top umpires in the American League came to Montgomery to talk with patients at the VA hospital. And this umpire doesn't even wear glasses.
Hello, fellas. My name is Larry Barnett. I'm one of the American League umpires, and I come today to show you the World Series film, talk to you a little bit about baseball. And for all you guys that might yell at me on TV, I just want to come down here and let you see what I actually look like. You know, the most interesting argument that we have is when a manager or a player will stand this close to you and scream at the top of his lungs with a mouthful of chewing tobacco. You have to walk away from that one. You have to wipe your eyes out.
Larry Barnett became baseball's youngest major league umpire when the American League bought his contract in 1968. Since then, he has found time to share his experiences with disabled veterans all over the country.
I go out 1 week a month with the disabled American veterans. I travel around the country, and starting today, February 1st, is my third year doing it. I've visited over 130 hospitals.
One of Barnett's most memorable games came in the World Series over 3 years ago.
When they talk about umpiring, they talk about Larry Barnett, they talk about the '75 World Series. I was involved in the play with Fisk and Armbruster in the third game, and I was the guy that they was going to shoot in Boston, but I got away. But that, of course, was the biggest thing I've ever had happen to me.
Barnett leaves Montgomery tomorrow, and next week he will begin to prepare for a brand new season full of balls and strikes. James Spann, WSFA TV Sports.
I come today to show you the World Series film.
That first day of the two-day games was devoted to outfitting of equipment and to on-the-slope instruction. None of our contestants had ever skied, but it didn't matter. They learned, and they learned surprisingly fast. On competition day, they were ready. Randy Estes of Montgomery on the slope and ready for his run. And it's a good one. Jenny Kraft of Mobile. She's off and she's going to make a happy landing. Montgomery's Mike Carroll. Look at that concentration. Montgomery's John McKinnon. John makes his run. That's Wilma Palmer and Don Fair close at hand. And now to the advanced slope, and Penny Dunn of Huntsville. Is she having fun? And here's Lisa Melton of Montgomery with her gold medal winning effort. A fall, but who cares? It's the joy of victory for everyone. All 18 Alabamians brought home medals and memories they'll not soon forget.
Beginning next week, there will be a new system for getting directory assistance help. Central Bell spokesman Tom Somerville says the biggest change will be a charge for the use of directory assistance.
The most fundamental component is the new number that customers will be dialing. Instead of just 411, now they'll need to dial 1 plus 411. And I think most people are familiar with the fact that each telephone line will have 5 free calls available to it, and that the customers will be charged 20 cents per call for anything above that 5-call allowance. Also, there will be certain exemptions available. People who are handicapped and unable to use the telephone directory are eligible to be exempted from any charges, and they simply need to call the telephone business office to find out about that. And of course, calls from coin phones, from hotel, motel guest rooms, and from hospital patient rooms will not be charged.
Directory assistance calls will affect the customer only if the call is for a local number or a number within the state. However, as one major exception, a long-distance statewide directory assistance call will not be counted if a long-distance call is made from that same number on the same day. Each customer will have the privilege of 5 directory assistance calls at no charge, with the additional benefit of obtaining 3 numbers per call, a total of 15 numbers per billing period.
It won't necessarily be from like February the 1st till March the 1st. It will be according to what your billing period is. It will cover a monthly billing period.
Beginning Monday, you'll have to dial 1 and then 411 to get directory assistance aid. The 1-555-1212 number will not change. The directory assistance pricing has not been a new concept. Some states have had it since 1974, like Cincinnati. South Central Bell has been toying with the idea for some time. A recent Public Service Commission hearing on South Central's zoning boundaries pushed the concept to the forefront. South Central lost nearly $5 million in rezoning charges and tax changes. The Public Service Commission, however, said they could implement the directory assistance charge to help compensate for the loss. South Central is predicting a $5 million profit from the change, but that only balances out their losses.
South Central Bell has drawn its statistics for directory assistance repricing from other Bell system offices, such as Kentucky and Georgia, who've had the assistance charges for some time. Those statistics show that the directory assistance charges will be felt by only 1 in 10 customers, and most of them will be business and not residential customers. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
It's designed as a worthwhile experience and an educational insight in Alabama state politics. It's not a course in political science, but work as a page in the Alabama legislature. There was a time when young people had to be elected by the legislature to serve as a page for an entire session. But now that it is easier to get to Montgomery because of improved transportation, pages serve in the legislature a week at a time. In the Senate, each legislator is allowed to select a minimum of 4 pages to serve during a regular session. Similar rules apply in the House. Applicants, both male and female, are supposed to be above the age of 12. They are paid $9 a day for a 5-day week. Some pages work a full week, others only while the legislature is in session, but the pay is the same. A page's primary duty is to run errands for the lawmakers. During the recent special session, applicants living close to Montgomery were greater in number. One was Mark Spencer, who served at the pleasure of Senator Mike Weeks of Troy.
Well, you have to go get bills and have to get bluebacks on some papers and go get coffee and that sort of stuff.
How do they get in touch with a page?
They either raise their hand or signal for one by calling or something like that.
Now, you get paid a weekly salary for serving as a page, but what about the tipping from the lawmakers? Do you do pretty good?
Well, usually when you go get something to eat or drink, they give you a small tip or something, the leftover change.
It's a good way for a boy to pick up spending money, or does it go farther than that?
It goes farther than that.
For some, this may be for fun and money, but for others, it may well be the training ground for future legislators. Elaine Stewart, WSFA TV News.
Thousands braved the cold early morning temperatures to attend a breakfast sponsored by Lieutenant Governor-elect George McMillan. Many of McMillan's supporters in the campaign were in attendance. Governor-elect Fob James stopped by for breakfast before going to a special communion service. House Speaker Joe McCorkatell was also in attendance. In his brief remarks, McMillan said that the people have elected some good men and women to the Alabama legislature. He said he would have to be strong in his dealings with the Alabama Senate, over which he will preside. McMillan stressed that even though the elections were over, there was still something the people can do to help the government.
It is not enough to elect people and said, well, we elected them, we'll leave it up to them. That's not enough. That is not enough, because we have begun to weaken the chain that we formed when we do that. Because you think about the ability you possess. Just pause and reflect here a moment. Every person in this room possesses considerable ability. And if you will continue to share that ability with me, with your other elected officials, then with your advice and counsel, and with your admonition, and with your inspiration, we will be able to achieve what we promised the people of this state that we wanted to achieve.
According to McMillan's wife, Ann, they chose a breakfast as their inauguration event because during the campaign, breakfast was about the only meal their family could eat together. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
50 years ago today, Martin Luther King came into this world and within 3 decades had become one of the largest worldwide leaders in a fight for civil rights. Ceremonies honoring this slain black leader have been going on for several days, with a gathering at the Dexter Avenue Baptist King Memorial Church as part of the overall commemoration. King was slain 7 years ago in Tennessee, but his philosophy has continued. That philosophy was the theme of a ceremony this morning at the church: hope for unity in a divided kingdom. Words of praise for this man, who is now revered by people of all colors and background, were spoken by several, but the main thrust of the ceremony was the strength of the message brought on by King.
We thank you also for the challenges he has given us to care for the poor and the disenfranchised, to fight all kinds of injustice.
Remembrances of the King era were brought out when those gathered joined hands and sang, "We Shall Overcome."
We shall overcome someday. God is on our side. God is on.
Ceremonies honoring King are being carried out nationwide with important figures joining in the commemoration of King's 50th birthday. Today's greatest eulogy of King came at a separate ceremony on Alabama State University's campus, and Janet May has more on that commemorative gathering.
Before becoming a human rights activist, Dick Gregory was a stand-up comedian, and he took advantage of his talent and his audience for the first hour of the observance. He said black awareness is partly the ability to laugh now at what was not so funny a few years ago.
I ain't never been upset about the way I or any other nigga talk myself. See, I understand why niggas talk so bad, because we learn our English from bad English-speaking white folks. So how come I'm supposed to speak better English than the teacher? When they brought me over here, I wasn't speaking nothing but pure Swahili. That white boy talking about go over here, come back, yeah, you got it.
Getting down to what this day is all about, Gregory said Dr. King's Black Revolution of the 60s was unique because it was the first time that the minority of a country were able to rise up nonviolently against the majority.
Like through Martin's leadership in the civil rights movement, we was able to pull off in the 60s. You can go through the history book and you can read about the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Irish Revolution, the Italian Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. And all of them had one ingredient that ours didn't have. And that's what makes that black revolution in the 60s the most important thing, one of that's ever happened in the history of this planet. You see, all those revolutions that I called off, that was the majority of the people taking up guns and running the minority out their country. What Martin's leadership did for us for the first time in the history of this planet, recorded history where the majority of the people rose up with no guns and backed the majority up against the wall and just with love and dignity say, I'm gonna get it. And you gonna give it to me. And we got it. Think about that.
Although Gregory admitted that the struggle for black equality is not over, he told the audience that society is using the wrong instruments to measure the quantity of black progress.
Martin fed us, baby. They didn't kill Martin before Martin fed us the most beautiful spiritual dinner on the planet. We just hadn't got the dessert. Now, I can survive without it, but the meal ain't complete unless I have it. So understand. Understand.
Gregory helped the people here today celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday by sharing his personal relationship with the slain civil rights leader. But most importantly, Gregory was able to make the audience aware of the progress and the perils of black society in America. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
He came in my second year back at Auburn in 1952, but I had read about Bob when he starred for West Point, Georgia High School. I was still at the University of Georgia at that time, and then came into Auburn as a freshman, a very talented athlete, a very talented young man in so many ways, academically, scholastically. And of course, the rest is history. Went on to become all-SEC, halfback, offense and defense, and a great punter for Auburn. He's a graduate of civil engineering school, and that takes a lot of doing, gentlemen, you know, to combine athletics and engineering. And of course, we're all very fond and very proud of Bob.
Well, I watched him quite a bit. I handed the ball on a few occasions, and I'd say that during the 50s, I think that Favre probably was the greatest broken field runner that probably was in the South at that time, and truly a great football player, totally dedicated to the game as he is totally dedicated to whatever he's into, and I'm confident that he'll be totally dedicated to doing the job of serving the people of Alabama.
Imagine you found the reception over here a little more pleasant this time compared to when you went over to Auburn back in November.
Well, it's nice to come to Alabama and not worry about a football game and know you're going to win. And in this case, Fob James won, and as I say, what I'm proud of is that the state of Alabama has won, because I think you're going to have 4 great years under the leadership of Fob James as governor, serving this great state.
And so I've got a boy that's 16-year-old and one that's 14-year-old, and I would have brought it with me tonight, but they wouldn't let me. I think the only one...
It's really a great honor to me, and I just thank everyone.
Problems in confronting us today. I had a fellow said that he had a real problem. He wanted to build a engineering feat on a river. He had to build a plant. As recently as World War II, the average worker on the American farm produced enough food for himself and 9 other people. Today, the statistics show that one farm worker produces enough for himself and some 57 other people. So in a rather short time, you have had rather a drastic increase in the productivity of farms throughout the country. America has not only fed its own people, but she has produced the food, of course, to feed the hungry people throughout the world. And why did this phenomenon of food abundance and economy occur here in the United States? Why not in some other country, in another hemisphere, where they had equal good soil and as favorable a climate as we do? A major reason is that the United States is a nation of family farmers like you, in business for themselves with their own capital invested, their own farm labor invested, trying to make a little money and to save some of it. The American farm family represents entrepreneurship at its very best. It is here that we find a direct relationship between a personal profit, or at least the hope of making a profit, and investment, innovation, risk-taking, and just plain good old-fashioned hard work and enterprise. And
This is the new 1979 Montgomery Telephone Directory, and this year's edition does indeed include some new features, as well as those you've come to expect. The Montgomery listings, some 75,000 of them, filling 201 pages. By the way, that's 8 pages less than the 1978 book. Listings for Fort Deposit, Prattville, and Wetumpka. And the yellow pages for your fingers to go walking through. There's also an update of the historic tour of Montgomery, map and fact sheet. More than 131,000 directories will be delivered in Montgomery, an increase of about 6,000 over last year. Another 22,500 will be distributed outside Montgomery. You can expect your new directory by Monday, February 5th, the date the new directory assistance charges go into effect. This is Michael Jones, WSFA TV News reporting.
Around October 20th, 1976, a Phoenix City woman was found beaten to death in her home. Since that time, 2 men and 1 youth have been charged and convicted of murder in that case. Today, the attorneys for one of those convicted, Ronnie Anderson, have asked the circuit court Court in Russell County to produce a report compiled by the Alabama Department of Public Safety's Criminal Investigation Unit. Attorneys for Anderson hope that information contained in this report will help them in the third trial of their client on murder charges. This trial is scheduled for later this month. One of Anderson's attorneys, Crawford Melton, says they need the report to help prove the whereabouts of one of the other defendants, Andrew Alston.
This report, which we are seeking from the state, would tend to corroborate the alibi of Mr. Alston, that he was indeed in Mississippi during these 3 dates in question. Therefore, if Mr. Alston was in Mississippi, there's no way he could have been with Mr. Anderson on October 18th, 19th, or 20th. So therefore, these alleged conversations and the sightings by these 3 witnesses could not have occurred.
Do you have any insight as to what is contained in the report and how it might help you prove what you are seeking to prove?
You know, like I say, there is a report and there's also documentary evidence which would tend to show Mr. Alston was in Mississippi. What we're going for here, of course, is just for basically impeachment purposes. This would definitely destroy the credibility of these 3 witnesses if the state itself has made a report that Mr. Alston was in Mississippi at the time of the alleged murder and not in Phoenix City or Columbus.
If the evidence Anderson's attorneys expect is in the report is made available to them, then it's possible that the testimony of 3 key state witnesses could be impeached. This could possibly result in new trials for all of the men, trials that could seriously question the handling of this case by law enforcement personnel and officers of the court in Russell County. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News, Phoenix City, Alabama.
Alabama State is on a 10-game winning streak, but the last 3 wins were less than impressive, coming over AUM, Edward Waters, and Talladega. The Hornets were hurt by its opponent's delaying tactics and its own poor shooting. ASU did not play this week, and basketball coach James Oliver says his team has primarily been working on fundamentals.
Fundamentals, head shrink, and all these things that will get us back to where we were about 2.5 weeks ago.
How about Carl Fortson? Is he coming around?
We'll get Carl back this week. Carl's been out about 4 weeks, and we really missed his rebound, and I think he'll help us under the boards. And we'll get Wardell Perry back. Wardell had a knee injury, and he's been out for the last 2 ball games. And, you know, he's been coming off the bench sometime, getting 16, 18, 20 points, and that's haven't helped us losing him. So we'll get both those people back. And, you know, for the first time this year, we'll be full strength. We haven't been full strength all year.
Despite the subpar victories, the Hornets are number 15 in the NAIA National Basketball Poll this week and will return to action Monday against Alabama A&M in Huntsville. James Spann, WSFA TV Sports.
With snow-covered farm equipment still parked around the Capitol complex, President Carter was meeting in the Oval Office with our group of journalists. During the news conference, President Carter cast a dark shadow on the fate of the farmers' demands for 90% parity. He told us he thinks the farmers have a right not only to come to Washington, but to demonstrate when they disagree with government policy or feel that they've been abused in getting an equitable treatment in our economic system. He said he thought the American agricultural movement, when it was first formed, effectively dramatized the plight of farmers, and the new agricultural bill, which went into effect in October of 1977, has worked well. But Mr. Carter said, and we quote, "There is no possibility of the Congress or I approving the action which would lead to an across-the-board 90% of parity payment for all crops." But the farmers are keeping up their vigil and making their feelings known. But in light of this attitude by the president, the possibility of success looks bleak. This is Bob Howell reporting from Washington, D.C. President Carter today rejected the idea of 90% of parity for American farmers. He told our group of journalists that he believes the farmers have the right to demonstrate when they disagree with government policy or feel that they've been abused by the economic system. But on the idea of 90% parity, Mr. Carter said, and we quote, "There is no possibility of the Congress or I approving action which would lead to an across-the-board 90% of parity payment for all crops. This is one of the strongest statements that the president has made in regard to parity, the 90% demand by the farmers who are demonstrating here in Washington. While many farmers are keeping up the vigil inside their campers and cabs of their large tractors, a small group braved the sub-zero temperatures and paraded their tractors and trucks around the streets near the Capitol. In fact, one tractor was set on fire late this afternoon, and the farmers stood around, keeping warm, talking with the police about what they plan to do tomorrow. This is Bob Howell reporting from Washington, D.C.
It's on television. Oh, yeah, not television. Oh, yeah. We can't do too many more graves right now. We've done a number of things, and I've made my share. I can't, however, think of any bloopers because the nature of the stories we do is such that if I make a blooper, I always have time to correct. People write us about them. So there's no shortage of story ideas. But we do try to go slow to avoid the interstate highways on the grounds that you can travel from coast to coast on those interstates without seeing anything. And we try to stick to the back